He's an old head.
Youngins are really starting to get on my damn nerves.
He's a purveyor of nonsense. He's a Georgia high school coaching job influencer. His favorite Bible verse is Jesus wept. He's the man of constant sorrow, Chris Lamb.
Yeah.
Welcome to Son Coaches Podcast, and today got a really good friend of mine. I've known this guy for, 25 years, Coach, something like that. We've talked back and forth on the internet, and when he was up in the mountains, he was my retirement plan, but he has since moved to be the head football coach at Blountstown High School in Florida. Coach Brad Waggoner, thanks for being on with us.
And thanks for having me.
Well, Coach, Coach is a Georgia boy, and I know most of his story, but he's going to tell you guys his story tonight. Tell everybody where you grew up and just go from there.
Well, I grew up in Fayetteville, Georgia, which is just south of Atlanta, and I attended high school. I went to a single-A high school. I went to Landmark Christian School. A lot of people ask me about Landmark Christian. My dad was one of the three founders of the school. And that school started, I guess, when I was a freshman. I'm going into being a freshman in high school, and so I was there from the very beginning.
I didn't know.
I was actually, the first 2 years we had to play in the Alabama Independent School Private School League because we had to wait 2 years in order to get into GHSA. So we had to, there was a 2-year waiting period, and so we actually played for the state championship in the AISA in my 10th grade year. And we entered, the Georgia High School Athletic Association. And it was the fall of 91. That was the first year Landmark entered the GHSA. And so we were in the Region 7A. We kind of, I believe, if I remember correctly, we took Palmetto's place. Palmetto and Campbell High School kind of combined to make Creekside. And so they put us in that Region 7A, and we were in there with like Mount Zion and Carrollton, Bowden, and Decatur at the time. I mean, a lot of the same little small schools in that area now, they're still down there. But I was on the very first playoff team at Landmark. We went to playoffs the very first year. We went into GHSA, and so I had a great experience there. I played for Coach Bill Thorne, who's now in the Georgia High School Hall of Fame, and he's also in I believe in the Georgia State Hall of Fame as well. He was more recognized as a track coach. He had over 20-something state championships in track and the boys and girls track teams, and but he was one that he had a big influence on my life. People ask me all the time, why did you go into coaching? A lot of that goes back to Coach Thorne. He was a big influence on me as a kid growing up, and seeing the way he did things, the way he cared about players, the way he pushed us. I mean, he was not always the easiest person to deal with, but he was one that he always was trying to find a way to push you to make you better, not only as an athlete but as a person as well.
I had a smaller school. You probably did more than just football.
Oh, I did. I mean, I was a 4-sport athlete. I played football, basketball, baseball, and Coach Thorne. This is back. One of his requirements for football was if you played football, you had to run track, and that was kind of a conflict of interest because if you had asked me growing up, I guess when I was a freshman, a sophomore, what my favorite sport was, and it may have been baseball at the time. And so he would make us go to track practice. Because my first 2 years, he was the track coach and baseball coach. And so he would make you go to track practice, and then you go to baseball. And I was sitting there thinking, I remember thinking, I was like, this is not fair. I mean, there's something right about this. And, I remember telling my dad, I was like, Dad, they found the school. I was like, listen, this is my junior year in high school. I was like, Dad, I really like baseball. Maybe I need to transfer to go to Fayette County High School, or you had Fayette County and McIntosh, which were the two schools in the county at the time in Fayette County. And but no, I stuck it out, and I played both, and I was actually all-state in football and baseball. And we were actually pretty good in baseball, to be honest with you. Even though we definitely didn't practice as much as we probably should have. But
I worked for a guy that went to Palmetto.
Did you?
They played baseball. David Stevenson. You probably know.
I do know him. I do, and
he was good.
And it was kind of funny how Landmark could see. We ended up being in Fairburn, Georgia. The school actually started in Fayetteville. When they started the Landmark, there's about, I think that first year they started grades 7 through 12, which was kind of, it's unconventional. Nowadays, usually when private schools start, they start from elementary up. But when my dad and the other founders, when they founded the school, most of their, all their kids were kids they were either going in the 7th grade or going into high school. And so they didn't have time to make it work for their kids if they didn't start the high school first. And so a lot of people said that they were going about it the wrong way and it probably wasn't going to work. And but the first year, I believe it was in 1989, was the first year of Landmark. And they started in Fayette County, in Fayetteville, at they made this tire warehouse. It was like a tire warehouse building. It was a Mass Tire, which is in Fayetteville, Georgia. He had a big old warehouse that he used for tires, and he gave the school the building, and so the school went in there, and I'm talking about they redid the whole thing. They made it into buildings and classrooms, and it was one big old long warehouse where the whole school was. It's the craziest thing. Nowadays, I tell people, and they probably don't believe me when I say this, but the lunchroom, everything was about one building all the way down. You could enter the weight room on the left side of the building and go out the back door and walk all the way down to the very end of the building to get your math class. and people, now those kids at Landmark now, they don't understand how all that started. But how we ended up in Fairburn was when Campbell and Palmetto formed Creekside. Campbell High School had a nice campus there in Fairburn, right there in downtown Fairburn, and they were going to just turn that building, that high school building, into I believe at the time they were going to turn it into a postal warehouse. And there was some influential people, Dan Cathy with Chick-fil-A, and all his kids went to Landmark, and so there were some influential people that got in with some of the people in Fairburn. And at first they weren't interested to lease or sell it to anyone else. But if I remember correctly, back, I guess it was in the spring of 1990, how Landmark ended up at Campbell High School, on the Campbell High School campus. Fairburn ended up agreeing to sell that campus to Landmark for a crazy price, like $200,000. The whole campus, you had a brand new gym, a whole football stadium, everything, as long as Landmark agreed to keep a school there. And then if they ever decided the school wasn't going to work, then they had to sell the back to the city of Fairburn for the same price. But now you're 30 years later, and Landmark's got a couple different campuses, and they've got, that place is totally different than it was when I went to school there. And so it's been pretty neat to see how far that school's come along over the last 30 years. It's still rolling, and they've had some really good football teams, and I think lately they've struggled a little bit, but it was pretty neat growing up and being able to see all that transform, and that kind of, a lot of that time at Landmark helped shape who I was as not only as a football player or an athlete, but as a person as well. I think I go back and think about those times there, that they were great times, and I was really glad I had the opportunity to grow up there and experience that.
So being an all-state baseball and football player, you had options. What did you decide to do after high school?
Well, now this is the crazy part. I coming out of high school, I had offers from football. I had some offers from baseball, but I wanted to go to Georgia Tech. That was where I wanted to go, and Georgia Tech didn't offer me. That wasn't an offer I had. And Georgia Tech was not very good at the time, but that's where I was dead set on going. And so I told my dad that that's where I wanted to go, and so I turned down offers to go to Georgia Tech. So I walked on to Georgia Tech, and I went out there the first spring, and my dad thought I was crazy, and I was like, well, this is what I wanted to do. And I went out the first spring, and I kind of caught the tail end of Mike Lewis, and Coach O'Leary was the defense coordinator at the time, and I was just kind of in the right place at the right time, and did some things went my way, and there was some turmoil with players leaving in and out, and so I got a chance to compete for some positions, and I knew I was never going to be a starter, but I was content on being a special teams player and playing, and I was unfortunately behind Keith Brookins and Ron Rogers, who were players that were a lot better than I was, and what's ironic now is Ron Rogers lives down here in Panama City, so he's one that I get to speak to periodically now, being down here at Blountstown. I knew I never was going to be a starter at Georgia Tech, and I went through 3 years there. And Coach O'Leary took over, and Coach O'Leary was one that he didn't care if you were a walk-on or a scholarship player. He didn't really care, and I got to my third year, and I knew I wanted to coach, and so but I also knew that at Georgia Tech that there's nothing to major in education at Georgia Tech, and so. I ended up transferring my junior year. I had 2 years of eligibility left, and I transferred to Liberty University in Virginia. Sam Rutigliano was the head coach at the time. But really, to be honest with you, how I ended up going there, I mean, obviously, I was able to go on full scholarship there. But George McIntyre, who has since passed away, but he was the former head coach at Vanderbilt at one time. His son's been a head coach at Memphis or somewhere recently, or I can't remember I don't know where his son's at now, but his son's been a head coach in college as well. But Coach McIntyre was really good friends with Coach O'Leary. And so I went and talked to Coach O'Leary and told him I just want to go somewhere I want to play. And I knew going to Liberty that nothing was guaranteed. But, I went to Liberty, and I was able to be a starter at Liberty. Had a great time playing football at Liberty. A couple of my friends from Landmark had gone there to play out of high school, so I was able to play my last 2 years with a couple of really close friends, and I was able to. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Who was y'all's quarterback?
When I was at Landmark, Ben Anderson was the quarterback when I was there. We had trying to think, you put me on the spot on some of those players there. We had a couple of guys that.
Well, I didn't know how before Biff Parson you were.
I think Biff Parson was not far after me, but
Okay.
But I know Biff real well. I mean, Biff's obviously did a great job at Rockmart and different places he's been, but he was a really good football player as well. Liberty's changed a lot. I mean, when I was there, Liberty they were still what they called Division I AA at the time, but they were starting to move fast. I mean, the facilities were getting big upgrades to start with at the time, but it's nothing like they got now. I mean, I went back to the first time I took one of my players last year on a recruiting visit up there, and I was like, "This is not the same Liberty I went to." I mean, it's not even the same ballpark.
Yeah.
But I tell you, one of the highlights of my time at Liberty, Sam Rutigliano was a neat head coach to play for. And George McIntyre was one that he was a big mentor to me. I mean, he was, I knew I wanted to coach, and he kind of helped me getting my first job. But one of the biggest memories I had at Liberty was, I think it was in the fall or maybe during summer camp of 1995. We had Coach Landry. He came from the Dallas Cowboys. He came and spoke to our team.
Oh, that's awesome.
I got to meet him in person. At the time, you didn't really think about. I mean, you thought I was pretty neat at the time, but now looking back on it now, I mean that was a really neat experience to be able to. He came and spoke to our team during the summer camp there, and and he was just like a bigger than life individual at the time. It was like, I can still remember him speaking, and it was pretty cool. When you sit back and think about it now, you watch all the videos and see him from the past. And but I had a really good time at Liberty from the standpoint of, I wouldn't be lying, but school was a whole lot easier at Liberty than it was at Georgia Tech too. But it was a great football experience. It was just a great environment, and it's pretty neat to see how well that program is doing now. And but going there, to be honest with you, it helped me get my first job. Like I said, George McIntyre was one that played a big role in helping me, kind of guide me, because he had been a college coach for a long time. And but I ended up, my first job was at VMI in Virginia, in Lexington, Virginia. Ted Kane, who was the offense coordinator at NC State, he was the one that had recruited me out of high school, but they had not offered me out of high school. But he was one that I kind of had stayed in contact with, and he hired me on staff there, and I was like the video coordinator / I don't know what title I had, but it wasn't much, and I think the grand pay was about $2,000 for the entire year. And I had to live in the bachelor's office quarters, and but I tell you who was on the staff was Preston Pogue, who's the head coach at North Murray. He was on the staff there. I believe he was the offense coordinator on that staff. He had played at NC State, and so there was a lot of really good guys on that staff. They were all young. Of course, I was right out of college, had no idea what I was doing. But that kind of that was where I kind of set the mark from the coaching standpoint. I was one of those guys. I was one of those young guys that was ambitious. I knew I wanted to move up. It didn't matter where I moved to. It didn't matter where I went to. But that kind of led me from there to my breakthrough, in college was got hired as a graduate assistant in Alabama. Coach Stallings actually is the one that hired me, and I was there, and then he was actually going out. I was there his last year, but then he was going out the next year, retiring wise. And so I spent a year with Mike DeBose. Mike DeBose's first year, and and then from there I got my first really full-time coaching job in college. Was at University of West Alabama, which used to be Livingston University, where I coached linebackers. And I think somebody asked, we were talking about this the other day. Somebody asked me, "Well, how much did you make at West Alabama as a full-time coach?" And I made $25,000 back in 1999.
Couldn't tell you nothing.
No, couldn't tell me this. I thought $25,000. I thought it was the greatest.
You hit the lottery.
I honestly thought it was the best job I had ever had, but the most money I ever had. Yeah. And what was funny was the house I lived in. It was four of us that shared a house, and in that house, it was me, Jeremy Pruitt, Ashley Ingram, who's now the head coach at Carson Newman, but he was at Navy for forever, and Will Friend, who has been the offensive line coach at Georgia and Auburn. I think he may be at Mississippi State now, but we shared the house. We were all in the same house together for that year at University of West Alabama, and it's hard to believe that in that house you got three major college, and then you had one that obviously hit it big, one to be the head coach at the University of Tennessee. And so, West Alabama was a place that, Bobby Johns was the head coach, and like I said, West Alabama's a lot better now than it was when we were there. And, I thought $25,000 was a lot of money. And then, I was recruiting. What was funny was I was recruiting at the time. It was in the spring of 2000, and I was recruiting in Georgia because West Alabama, the Division II schools, you kind of just, the recruiting budgets are so bad, you kind of just carpool with different people. And what was funny is I ended up carpooling one time with Will Muschamp. Will Muschamp at the time was at Valdosta State, if I remember correctly, before he ended up going to LSU, I think, as a position coach at the time. But we ended up being at the same place, and we were recruiting back. We were in my hometown. We were at Sandy Creek High School, which is It's in Fayette County. It's in Tyrone, Georgia. And Rodney Walker, who was he had just been hired from he was at Peach County. He had just been hired at Sandy Creek, and and he was one that he was kind of a legend at the time, and in Georgia high school at the time. And obviously, he's in the Hall of Fame now. But I ended up leaving West Alabama to come to work for Coach Walker at Sandy Creek. He hired me as a defensive line coach, and I worked for him for 3 years. And I'm telling you, that was a long 3 years. I learned a lot of football, but that was a long 3 years.
What year was it?
I worked for him from, I guess it was from 2000 to 2002. We had Kedrick Golston, we had Calvin Johnson, we had some really good players, and we had some really good teams. It's crazy, they won those state championships, when Chip took over. But probably one of the best teams that Sandy Creek ever had was that 2000 team. We lost to Shaw. We lost to them in the playoffs. I believe it was the second round. We lost to them 7-6. Well, I guess it was 6-6 at the end of the game, and we lost to them on before Georgia High School on penetration. We were playing down in Columbus, and it was crazy. The craziest thing happened was we had the game won. I mean, the game was over. We had it won. And all we had to do was punt the ball. All right, all we had to do was punt the ball, and the game was over with. Well, we punted the ball, and listen, there's like 12 seconds to go. I can still remember sitting in that box watching this happen. There was 12 seconds to go, and we punted the ball, and that ball hit one of our guys in the back, and it ricocheted off his back and rolled back, and we lost by 2 yards.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. It's probably the worst loss. I mean, that's probably the worst loss in Coach Walker's. Probably. I mean, I'm talking about that loss is probably something he has never gotten over with, because the game was over. We had it won, and it just it hit one of our guys. I mean, I'm talking about right in the back, right there on the sideline. And it rolled back, and we lost by 2 yards on that thing.
And then Shaw won it that year, didn't they?
And Shaw won it. Actually, Shaw went on. I think Shaw beat Statesboro that year and beat them like bad, like 35-0 bad. And it was us and Shaw. We had. We both had really good defenses, and it was just a battle of two really good teams.
Yeah, I was at Worth that year, and we lost to them in the first round. We played Cairo in game 10, and then we played Shaw game 1 of the playoffs. They beat us like 24-17, and we were all saying, all right, they're probably going to – I mean, we wouldn't be shocked if those two ended up, and that's when they played that 7-3 game in the Dome.
Well, and then people ask me all the time, my high school coach was very beneficial in my career from the standpoint of wanting to be a coach. But, the person who really, I talk about who I learned probably the most of any coach I've ever been around was Rodney Walker. I mean, Coach Walker was one that, he just, obviously he's in the Hall of Fame, and that's why, but he just had that knack on how to run the program. Not everybody liked him, but he did things. The kids loved him. He ran the program the right way. He was hard. He was tough. But he was very organized. I don't think assistant coaches nowadays probably could work for someone like him. Looking back, I think he abused us. I think as coaches. I can remember now thinking back on Sundays. I remember sitting there on Sunday nights. And I can remember going up to the cafeteria to fill up the cooler with ice at midnight, and still thinking, are we ever going to get out of this place? And it was one of those things like, what is Coach Walker doing back there? We done met, we done watched film, we had done gone over everything possible. But back then, you didn't leave until the head coach left, and so we'd be sitting there, and Chip was an assistant at the time. We had Eddie Householder, we had Scott Jackson, we had Roger Gentry. We had some really good coaches on our staff. But I remember just sitting there, we all sitting there and we talking, and we're like, is this man ever going to leave? And then finally, we were sitting around, who's going to go there and check and see how much longer it's going to be? And somebody go there and check, and Coach Walker's already gone. We're like, we're all sitting here wasting our time, waiting for him to leave. He's done gone. but Coach Walker, I mean, I'm telling you, he was one of the he was a great defensive coach, football coach. And I find myself today still doing certain things that he did. The way he stretched, the way he did his practice format, the way he taught the defense, and but he was one that he really had a big impression on me. He's one that I looked up to. I think that's because I think he was so tough to work for. You wanted to, I mean, every day you wanted to make sure that you just want to make sure you didn't get chewed out that day. To be honest with you, and so you had to bring it every day. And but I find myself now, the kind of the organization of the program and the organization, how we do our things and how we do the Bush Club is very similar to the way he did things back then. And so he's one that, I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it hadn't been from the time I worked for him as well. So, but, going from there, that's when I ended up being a head high school coach. I've coached in 3 different states. I was at Laverne High School down in South Alabama for 3 years. Laverne is very similar to here at Blountstown. Laverne was a place that had a head coach that was there for over 40-something years. He's in the Hall of Fame. At one time, he was the winningest coach in the state of Alabama. But Glenn Daniel, Laverne's won several state championships in football. But what was ironic, when I went to Laverne, I guess I was 28, 29 years old at the time, back in 2005. I took over for Mike DeBose, who I was a graduate assistant for at Alabama. When he left Alabama, he needed a few more years in the retirement system in Alabama. And so he was actually the head coach at Laverne for a couple of years. And so I followed him. But Laverne was kind of one of those places that, they won for me. They won after me, and they're still winning. And so it's one of those places that football's important there. And, it's just one of those unique places where football is just really good for that community. And, looking back, I was young, and I was big on, I was wanting to move up. And, and that was probably one of the best jobs I ever had. It was just one of those ones that it's just one of those towns that just everything was about football. And that's kind of in a short story of mine. That's why I ended up coming here to Blountstown. I wanted to come back to a place like that. But Laverne was a neat place as well. And that kind of led me back to Georgia. I went to, I got hired at Chattooga High School. That was kind of my chance to come back home to Georgia. I guess that was in 2009. Spent 3 years at Chattooga. That's where I met my wife. My wife is from Summerville, Georgia. She went to Chattooga. And, I was able to, I followed, Coach Starr, John Starr was a friend of mine. He kind of got pushed out for whatever reason. And then they had an interim coach, and they kind of there was like 3 coaches in one season, and I came in right behind that. And, but Coach Starr had a good program, to be honest with you. He had a good team coming back. And so, I kind of walked into a great situation. We went 9-1 my first year at Chattooga in 2009. I think it tied the most wins in Chattooga history for a single season. Our only loss was to Calhoun, and Coach Lamb had things rolling at the time at Calhoun. And but we had a player at Chattooga that played for him in 2009, Sonoris Perry, who ended up going to play at Louisville, and then ended up playing in the NFL for about 6 years. He went to play for the Bears and Miami and for the Titans for a little while. But those 3 years at Chattooga were 3 years that they were great years. Obviously, for the standpoint of I got to meet my wife, and we had my son my 3rd year there at Chattooga. And so when I left Chattooga, my wife's family was about ready to kill me. And my wife's like, "What are we doing?" And I was like, I had a plan in my head on I wanted to get back to coaching in college somehow. And so my wife was like, this plan is not very good, I don't think. So, but I took the head job. I took the head job at Decatur High School in Atlanta. And the crazy thing about it is we moved to Cartersville because that was kind of the halfway mark. And so my wife kept her job. She was a school counselor. She kept her job in Summerville. And she'd drive 40 miles one way, and then I'd drive 40 miles the other way to Decatur every day. And I had a plan. I was like, I'm gonna go there, and I knew that getting back into college was a lot to do with the recruiting wise, and so I'd worked all those college camps every summer, and my son was, I guess he was 5-6 months old at the time, and so I was like, well, if I'm ever going to try this, I'm going to go to Decatur and see if we can turn around. And Decatur was kind of going through, Decatur had been really good when Coach Davenport Coach Davenport took Decatur to the Final Four. I guess a few years before I went to Decatur, but Decatur had changed a lot. I mean, the school had kind of outgrew the area, and it was a really good school, but it was just at the time you had Tucker that was rolling, and you had some schools around it that were rolling, and so and we were also in a bad region. We were in there with St. Pius, who was really good. We were there with Blessed Trinity, who was really good. But we went there, and I think that I can't remember. It's been so long ago, but I think they were 2-8 years before I got there, and we ended up going either 5-5 or 6-4 that first year I was there, and so it was a really good experience because I was able to kind of coach in the city of Atlanta. It was something different. Most all my career I've coached in rural areas, and this was just it was different. I mean, it was different coaching kids that were in the city there, and and I had some really good kids on that team. We had a couple of kids we had one receiver that went to Western Carolina that had a really good career, and we had 2 twins that went out there to Utah, and they also were really good players and had really good careers there as well. But while I was there, I got to meet Coach Johnson at Georgia Tech. Even though I went to Georgia Tech, I didn't play for Coach Johnson, so I really didn't have any connection to him. But I started writing. Back then, I guess nowadays you got nowadays they're social media driven. But then I guess social media was a little bit, but that wasn't the main connection then. But I started writing Coach Johnson a letter once a week. How I wanted to be a part of his staff. I was willing to take anything. It didn't matter. I'll be honest with you, it didn't matter what the position was. But I went 6 months and never heard from him. But it was I guess it was the winter of 2014. I got a phone call from him, and he asked me to call him back. So I called him back, and Coach Johnson's like, well, he said, I'd like for you to come in here and talk to me. And I'm sitting there thinking that this is my breakthrough. This finally worked. I told my wife, I said, this finally worked.
The plan has come to fruition.
I said, I told you all those moves. You just had to trust me on this. And she was like, you lost your mind. And so I went there. I won't forget. I went there. It was in February of 2014. I went there, and I showed up at Georgia Tech's office. I was like, man, this is going to be the best day. It is finally happening for me. So I wait out there, and I finally get a chance. The secretary told me to go on back there, and so I went there, knocked on his door. I walked in, and I won't forget Coach Johnson kind of sitting in his desk, and he's not a man. He's kind of a man of not many words. He's a straightforward person. He don't waste time. And so he has his glasses kind of pulled halfway over his nose, and I walked in, and I was like, "How you doing, Coach?" And basically he just said, he stood up, shook my hand, and said, "Listen," he said, "don't write me another letter." he said, "I ain't hiring you." So he told me. He said, any man is going to write me for 6 months. He said, I'm going to at least meet him. And so I met him, and I'm telling you, Coach, that meeting, I went down there, and that meeting did not last more than 15 minutes. And it may not have been 15 minutes. It may have been less than 10 minutes. And so I walk it out, Bill. You can't, how you walk out of you go to an interview and it don't go real good. I walk out in a daze. I'm sure thinking, all right, did that really just happen?
And you don't want to tell your wife.
No,
listen,
I don't want to. And so I'm driving back because we were living in Carsville, and I was driving back, and then my wife called a couple of times. I don't answer the phone, and finally I answer the phone. She said, "Well, how'd it go?" I was like, "It was 15 minutes long." And I said, "She's like, well, was that good or bad?" I was like, "No," I said, "It wasn't good." I said, "That's not, man. He wasn't interested in hiring me. All he wanted to do was just say he met me, and he told me the first words I was met was, I ain't hiring you." and so listen, I just finally decided, little Brad was, I guess he was 1 now. I mean, my baby's getting ready to be 2. And so I was sitting there, little Brad was 2. And so I was like, that just kind of got away to tell me that, I'm supposed to stay in high school. And, so I was just kind of dead set on staying where I was at. And I was getting ready for spring practice. And, I remember going to we went to Florida for spring break that spring as a family. And I remember sitting there on spring break, and I was really down and out. I mean, I was like, when you kind of set a goal on something, I'm one of those guys that when you set a goal, I've got one track mind on how am I going to achieve that goal. And so I was depressed about it. I mean, I went through about a couple months of depression about it. I was like, it was probably one of the first goals that I guess I had set as a person where it just didn't happen the way I thought it was going to happen, or at least even come close to that being the case. But I was sitting there at the beach at spring break, and I finally I told my wife, I was like, I've been thinking about this. She's like, well, you just need to be happy doing what you're doing. You love coaching football. Just be happy with doing what you're doing. And I said, yeah. I said, maybe you're right. I said, but you know what? I said, I'm not letting that man get me. I'm going to start writing that man again. I said, there is no way I'm going to let that man tell me not to write him. I'm going to start writing him again. So listen, I won't forget. I started writing that man again. I said, I'm going to just write him once a week. And so I wrote him again. And then, of course, I didn't hear anything. But believe it or not, we went through spring practice of 2014. We went through spring practice. We had our spring scrimmage. And I get home, and of course, you had cell phones in, but you still had your phones at home that had, your answer machine at home as well. And so I remember getting home, and there was a message on my answer machine that said, it was from Coach Johnson. It said, hey, Brad, I want you to come by and see me on Monday at 9:00. That's all it said. And so I've been following them left and right. I was like, my wife, what's that about? I was like, there is no positions open. I was like, there is nothing open in that place. And so I knew Ted Roof real well at Georgia Tech. And so I called Ted. Ted was on the road recruiting at the time, but they were in the middle of May recruiting. And he's like, Brady said, there's nothing open. He said, I don't, I have no idea what's about. So I'm sitting thinking, well, maybe. I said, who knows? And so my wife said, "You're going to go, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah, I'm going to go." So I went. So I showed up there on that Monday morning at 9:00. It was like May the 20-something in 2014. And that first meeting I went there was 15 minutes. Well, this meeting was less than 5 minutes. and I'm serious now, less than 5 minutes. I walk in, and he's sitting that same way. I'm like, why does this man just keep bringing me here? And he said, I can always say to me, he said, Brad, you want to come here still? I said, yes, sir. He said, all right. He said, you ready to work on Thursday? I said, well, Coach, I said, we are, this is our last week of school. So it's like, being a teacher, you just can't all of a sudden just tell me you're going to be gone on Thursday. He said, well, you better figure it out. And I was like, yes, sir. And so I walk out that door, and Terry Anton, who was the head coach secretary, so I went and asked her, I was like, did he just offer me a job? That's what I asked her. And she's like, yeah, he told me to send your name to the human resource. And so I walked out, and the first thing I did, I called my wife. I was like, you ain't gonna believe this. I was like, I finally got hired at Georgia Tech. And she's like, and her exact words were, well, what are you gonna be doing? I was like, I don't know. And she's like, are you gonna get paid? I said, I don't know. And she said, you don't even know if they're going to get paid? I said, I don't know. And she said, well, what did you tell me? You had to think about it? I was like, No, I took it.
Yeah, I'll see you Thursday, Coach.
And listen, believe it or not, I took that job, and listen, I signed. Well, they sent me on those. It wasn't that contract, but just one of those letters where you agree to take the job. And I had no idea what I was going to make. I had no idea what I was going to make. At the time, I was making probably about $80,000 as a head coach in Georgia, and but I ended up. They hired me as the assistant director of player personnel. I worked on offense. I came in there in 2014, and Coach Johnson was unbelievable to work for. I mean, he was not only he was a brilliant football coach, but he gets that kind of reputation from the media, somewhat of being stern and hard to deal with. But he's probably the most compassionate person I've ever seen in my life. I mean, behind the scenes, he's one of those guys that he was great to work for. I mean, you always knew where you stood with Coach Johnson. Whether it was good or whether it was bad. He was one of those guys. I mean, there was no in between line. I came in 2014. We had I think he was kind of on the hot seat, for whatever reason after the 2013 season. But we ended up winning the coastal championship in 2014. We beat Georgia in Athens. We played for the ACC championship game. We lost to FSU. It was a really good close game. And then we ended up going to the Orange Bowl and winning big. And so it was just, I was kind of there. That was probably the last high, I guess, that Georgia Tech's had. Been a while now, but it's probably the last high they've had in a while. And then, as I look back, I was able to move me up to the associate director of player personnel. I got I was in charge of all the recruiting on offense. It was kind of, to be honest, it was a dream job for me. It's what I'd always wanted to do. I loved recruiting. And there were some great guys on that staff. You had Ted Roof, you had Andy McCullum, you had Brian Cook, and there were so many guys on that staff that were all just great guys. And you had Mike Seawalk, who was another guy that was really good to me when I was there. And I will always be in debt to Coach Johnson for giving me that opportunity, because it was an opportunity of a lifetime. And it was, I think the biggest highlights of those times was obviously beating Georgia. I mean, 2 of the 3 years I was there, we were able to beat Georgia at Athens. And anytime Georgia Tech beats Georgia, that's a big deal. And right now, Georgia's hard to beat by anybody right now. And so, it was from there where I knew that Coach Johnson was getting ready to retire, and I also wanted to be able to see my son grow up. In college coaching, it was a little bit harder from the standpoint of just some time constraints, and the way recruiting is now. It's even more so now than it was back in 2016, 2017. If a recruit wants to come out of school, if you work in player personnel, then you're going to be the one that's going to be there. And so I left there. I had so many years in teacher retirement in Georgia. I went not enough years, not enough for 30 years, but I had right at 20 because I was able to buy some of my years from early in my career at Alabama back in Georgia. And so I knew in Tennessee you only needed 5 years to be vested. So I ended up going to Trousdale County High School, which is it's in Hartsville, Tennessee, which is right outside Nashville. Trousdale County is a school that's got 10 state championships in football. It's a football town. The superintendent is Clint Satterfield. Satterfield's kind of run that place. Coach Satterfield, I believe he had 6 of the state championships, if I remember correctly. His dad had one before him. But between him and his dad, that they were the head coaches there for over 45, 50 years, something like that. It was something crazy. Trousdale was kind of in a rut that they had dismissed their coach the year before for some crazy reason, and they had just been a kind of a first round playoff team for a couple of years in a row, which is not the standard there. And my wife's like, "Why would you want to go into that situation?" Well, I wanted to go to a football place, and so I went there. And my first year there was in 2017. We won the region the first year there. And we made it to the second round playoffs and got put out by Marion County, which is a team in Jasper, Tennessee, which is a pretty good program as well. But I had a lot of kids coming back, and they kind of bought into what we were doing there. But in 2018, we led them to the state championship game. Played for the state championship in 2018, and we lost. We had chances to win the game, but we just, things didn't go our way. And so I had the opportunity in 2019 to come back to Georgia. And I took the head football job at Elbert County High School, which is the home of the Granite Bowl over in Elberton, Georgia. And I went there. I guess during that year I was there, I followed Sid Fritz, who was obviously another successful coach in Georgia. He was at Rome, and he ended his career over at Washington Wilts. But he was going out, and I was coming in, and we went to the playoffs in 2019. It was Elberton's a great place as well, but we're getting ready for spring. I guess we're doing winter workouts and going into 2020, and that was when COVID hit, and so obviously everybody in Georgia, all the schools shut down in March, and everybody was kind of sent home, sent different places, and there was a lot of uncertainty. Nobody knew what was going on. My wife's family was from Somerville on the other side of the state, and so she really wanted to get back closer to home. And at the time, in Georgia, at the time, you didn't know whether you're going to have football or not. And so, we're getting there to the end of May, and my wife's like, and she wanted to come back closer to her family. So I ended up leaving Elbert County as the head coach, and I kind of stood that on faith, and I took I took the defensive coordinator job at South Pittsburgh High School, which is it's in South Pittsburgh, Tennessee, which is you're only about 35, 40 minutes from Somerville. It's right over the Tennessee line. And so I went there, and I was like, well, I may be stuck as assistant for the rest of my career, because when you leave a head coaching job like that, could be assistant. People are going to ask why. Well, it was just, it was the right thing to do for family at the time. And so I went there, and we ended up having football back, and but we played for the state championship at South Pittsburgh the first year I was there, and it's been the story of my career in state championship games. We came up short again, and so that's kind of been that's my goal is to win a state championship. We used to be on the short end. I did it twice now, but that led me to be the head football coach at Gatlinburg. I didn't know anybody in Gatlinburg. How that job came open was the superintendent who hired me at Trousdale knew the superintendent at Gatlinburg, and Gatlinburg was a school that again, who had a lot of tradition, had not necessarily won big in the playoffs, but had lots of tradition. Had Benny Hammonds as the head coach there for over 42 years as well, so there was a standard that had been set there, and I was just I was fortunate to be able to come in there, and and they accepted me really well. And the players there, we had some good players. They were young at the time, but we came in there, and the way I did things were probably a little bit different than they had done things there in the past. But that community, those players, those coaches, we had a really good staff. They bought into what we were wanting to do, and we all had the same vision. And we went 7-5 the very first year I was there. We got to be out the second round. But over the last 2 years, we've gone 22-4 there, and so we had things rolling. This past year we had for the first time ever on one team we had two kids that signed Power 5 there. One went to Wake Forest and one went to Illinois, and then we had our quarterback that went to VMI, and so that was a big deal there. That community just kind of caught wildfire there. That community just bought into what we were doing from a football standpoint, and it was really neat to watch. And but people say, well, why in the world would you want to leave Gatlinburg? Gatlinburg's a great place to live, and there's no question about that. But
you were my retirement plan.
Well, I think I was a lot of people's retirement place. And what's funny is I had been coming down to the beach. As a family, we've always come to St. George Island for a week, because in Tennessee you get a 2-week dead period. So even when I was at Georgia Tech, we used to get 2 weeks off in the summer. So we kind of got in a habit of always coming with my wife's family to St. George Island for a week, and then we'd go with my family the next week to Panama City. And so, like any coach does, we'd come down here during the summer, and when you're bringing back then you're bringing a 5-year-old kid or 6-year-old kid, you get to a point on the drive where they had to get out and get their energy out of them. So we kind of for several years in a row we stopped at Blountstown. Just on the way to St. George, we stopped there and we let little Brad get out on that football field and run up and down that field to get his energy out of him. And we always had that tradition where we stopped at different high school stadiums and let him just run up and down. He thought that was great. So, I got to know, Coach Jordan, Greg Jordan, who was the head coach here at Blountstown. He was from Blountstown, highly successful coach in Florida. He was a former player here. He was head coach here for 12 years. Bo Johnson was an assistant for him, and then Bo Johnson took over for him. I knew Bo Johnson really well, and so it was a place that I had always, for the last 3 or 4 years, where I really wanted to. If it came open, I was really wanting that opportunity if it came open, and I just didn't know when it was going to come open. To be honest with you, it was a couple of years ago. I thought it may work out, but it wasn't the right timing. And after my first year at Gatlinburg, and lucky for me, I was able to go back to Gatlinburg because I had 2 really good teams coming back at Gatlinburg. But I guess everything kind of lined up the way it was supposed to line up. And Blountstown came open, I guess in February, and I knew that if they gave me that opportunity, I wasn't going to say no. And I guess the biggest thing, I know I got friends that question all that stuff, but the biggest thing is, there's no hidden agenda. Florida does not pay coaches nearly as well as Georgia, and they don't pay them nearly as well as the state of Tennessee does. And I took a pay cut to come here, and I didn't take this job for money. I took this job because I wanted to be here. I wanted my son to be able to grow up in a football town. There's not many of these towns left like this right here. Even some of those small ones in Georgia, they get less and less and less over the years. And I just wanted my son to have the opportunity to grow up in a sports town, just in a town where sports was important. Obviously school important, but where it was a community-based school where the community really gets behind the school, and then obviously, from a step standpoint, I wanted to be in a place where, you have a legitimate chance to work to win a state championship. And right now we got a team right now that's very talented but very, very young. But we got a group of kids that love football and they love being Blountstown Tigers. And you got a community here that loves Blountstown football and that wants to do anything they can to help this program be successful. And so, when you get all that working and everybody going in the same direction, I think that it could be something special. And, my family is really excited about being here. My wife, she's a school counselor, and so she's younger than I am. So, she's got 15 years in teacher retirement system in Georgia. So she's actually got hired. She's going to be the school counselor at Bainbridge High School. So, she drives about 50 minutes north from here, which is to get to Bainbridge. And so she's already actually started work there. And so she's going to be one of the school counselors at Bainbridge High School. And so it helps her stay in teacher retirement system in Georgia. And but of course, my son, he'll be in 6th grade, and Blountstown is a 6 through 12 school, and we're a single A school here in the Panhandle, which is pretty unique because we were a small school, but we still have about 80 kids on the JV and varsity team. So you got a lot of kids that want to be football players here. And going back to what we were talking about earlier, is Gatlinburg, you want that to be your retirement place. What's funny is I kept my house in Gatlinburg, and I was going to hire Roger Gentry, who worked with me years ago at Sandy Creek. He had been at Sonoyville as a head coach, and he's been offense coordinator, offense line coach at Hart County for, I guess, the last 7-8 years. He worked for Coach Gillespie, and he'd been working with Corey the last few years, but they ended up still hiring him as an assistant at Gatlinburg, and he is renting my mountain cottage up there. So
That's awesome.
So he sends me pictures all the time of bears, and he's like, "Why'd you want to leave this?" And I'm sending him pictures of it's like 105 degrees here. I mean, it's like hot. I mean, I'm talking about every day. It's like hot. And my son's like, "Daddy, is it ever gonna cool off here?" I was like,
No.
No. Yeah. He's like, you always talk about, we used to always talk about, when the frost hits. I like, Brad, the frost ain't going to ever hit here. You ain't going to worry about it.
Yeah, there ain't no frost.
No, ain't no frost. You got heat and you got gnats.
Yeah. And winning football games.
Winning football games. You got to make sure you do all three of those things.
I just remember we went up there. We took my parents up there for Thanksgiving a couple of years ago, and you're like, "Hey, man, come see me." And I told my wife and my mama, I was like, "Hey, I got to go see my buddy. He's the head coach over here at Gatlinburg. He wants me to come see the facilities." And my mom goes, "We only have one car. You're not leaving us without a car." Like, she was not about it at all. I was like, "Well, come on," because Rachel doesn't care. She's like, "Whatever, we'll be fine." And my mom's like, No. I don't think you understand. You're not leaving us up here in this chalet without, whatever. What if me and Rachel want to go to the outlet mall?" And I'm like, "You're doing that tomorrow." I can run over here for an hour or two and hang out with my buddy and check out his facilities. And then we go up the mountain or somewhere. We went somewhere and we get stuck in a line. And I'm like, "What are we doing?" And there was this mama bear and, her baby bears, and she's going, they live there. So they're going wherever. And these fools from Kansas are hanging out the window. And I'm like, "Look at these idiots. We're fixing to see something right here because they're going to get eaten by a bear." And I'm like, "Just keep going. It's a bear." And I'm like, "Man, Brad sends pictures like this all the time. Like they're running across the football field."
Listen, in all my years of coaching football, this is my 28th year coming up. But last year, my 27th year, you hear about you got to stop practice because of lightning. You got to stop practice because there's a storm coming, or the wind blow. It's too hot outside. But we had to stop practice last year at Gatlinburg because we had a bear that came onto our field, and they couldn't get the bear off the field. I mean, it was just walking across the field. And so I was like, "What do we do?" I said, "I guess we go inside." And so we go inside, and it's like, nobody's going to do anything to that bear. That bear just walking around out there. And finally, about 25 minutes later, that bear just walks itself back up the hill and leaves the place.
And the kids are probably like, "It's just a bear."
And the kids at Gatlinburg were like, "Hey, it's just a bear." And I was like, "That's all it is." But
like us with snakes. No. It's a bear.
It is. But Gatlinburg, that was a great place. It was great people. And, I met some lifelong friends there, and, it was hard to leave there. I mean, it was easy to come to Blountstown, but it was hard to leave there as well.
Right.
And, it was a really good place. And, one of my assistants got the head job there, and, I'll be his biggest fan, and I'm pulling for them to be good. And, I'm sure they will be. And, but I will always be, indebted to them as well, because they gave me an opportunity to come there, and I was able to get vested in Tennessee there, and so it was a win-win for me. But obviously, it was a great place to work as well. And Benny Hammonds was a guy that obviously a legend there. There'll never be another Benny Hammonds there at Gatlinburg, but he was one of my biggest supporters. He's one of the ones I still contact. I still talk to today. And what's funny is, Benny was like I said, he goes there gathering for forever, and he was an old power eye guy. I mean, I'm talking about, they always talk about Benny. He never threw the ball ever. I mean, he didn't believe in throwing the ball. It was like, if you threw the ball, that was just not in his dictionary. And but what's funny is we set all these records that they're offensive in the last 3 years, and of course it wasn't necessarily hard to break because they hadn't thrown the ball a whole bunch, but we had a quarterback that he threw the ball for over 7,000 yards the last couple of years, and that quarterback was his grandson. So it made it a little bit easier to throw the ball with his grandson. But that Hammonds family up there, I mean, that family is obviously
well thought of there for many reasons, but I know that they were good to the Waggoners, and they were ones that I have high respect for.
Well, we enjoy watching the pictures of little Brad fishing all the time. I know that kid, how much he enjoys fishing, and now he can fish as much as he wants to.
He does, and he loves being the coach's son in life, but he loves, like, every year. I mean, I think that he's probably my worst critic of anybody possible. I mean, to him, you ask him, he'll tell you exactly what he really thinks. He has no filter in his mind. And he's pretty. It's funny when those, in the last couple of years we've had a lot of colleges come recruit those kids to Gatlinburg, and of course, little Brad wanted to be there on every one of them. He wanted to meet each one of them, and he's like, "Well, Dad," he said, "When's Lane Kiffin coming by?" He said he's the one. He said for all these coaches, Coach Saban. He said Lane Kiffin's my favorite coach. I said, why is that? He's like, he'd be fun to play for. And I was like, he said he lets his son on the sideline wave the smoke machine up in there. And he said, why don't you let me do that on the sideline? I was like, well, I don't have the same budget that Lane Kiffin has.
Yeah, for starters.
We
don't have a smoke machine.
I said, Lane Kiffin could probably pay for some private charter to take his son fishing, where I just send you down here to the local creek. And so,
well, that's awesome, Coach. I can't wait to see how you get things continuing going in the direction they've always gone in Blountstown, and hopefully you can break the seal on that state championship for Blountstown and for yourself down there. I know it's coming. Just a great career you've had thus far. I appreciate you coming on and sharing with us your journey. A true man of faith and family and football, and treasure your friendship and over the years. And I just really appreciate you coming on and sharing with everybody, everything that you've experienced thus far.
Well, thanks for having me. And I think what you're doing for high school sports in general, I think that high school sports is a big deal, not only for wins and losses, but it's a big difference for these coaches to invest in these kids' lives all over the state of Georgia and Florida and Tennessee, wherever, because a lot of times these kids, 99% of them are going to play in college, but just what they learn from being a high school athlete can really change so many in their lives. And but thank you for all you do for high school sports and in all these states.
Well, thanks, Coach. And if there's ever anything I could do for you, just reach out and let me know.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Coach.
All right, man. See you, man.